Welcome to Veterans Chronicles. I'm Greg Corombos. Our guest this week is Ed Manley. He's a U.S. Army veteran of World War II. Ed Manley initially wanted to be a radio operator in the military, just like his stepfather, but he was turned down for that role. Instead, at the age of just 20 years old, Manley enlisted in the Army and later served as a paratrooper in the 502nd Parachute Infantry Regiment. He actually appears among the paratroopers photographed with General Dwight D. Eisenhower in that very famous photo taken on the eve of D-Day. A lifetime now after the war, Ed Manley says his jump into Normandy to begin the assault on German forces still stands above anything else he's ever done.
Oh, that was the biggest point in my life. Well, when I jumped, that was the biggest thing I've ever had to happen in my life. To be in the lead of something as big as international, you know. And I have people today come up to me and still thank me. There were shopkeepers and stuff that were working in those days.
Prior to his military service, Manley spent his youth playing sports. And blessed with raw talent, he even entertained the possibility of playing professionally. However, life was not easy for Manley. As an orphan, growing up in Harlem, New York, Manley often had to make his own way.
I was pretty good physically. I played ice hockey, everything but basketball I played. And I could bunt better than any of the guys. I was a fast runner. So I probably would have gone professional if I'd been any longer in the streets, you know. You play the cards you're dealt in life.
Once he enlisted in the Army, Manley had grand ambitions. He wanted to be the soldier that killed Adolf Hitler.
All I wanted to do was kill Hitler. I wasn't a good soldier in the barracks, but I was good in the field. That's where you asked, did I use the home at all in later life? Well, stuff I learned in there, I used to correct the sergeant. And the first couple of times, I get out of here, Manley. And I would come up to him, I would say, after he'd tell us what he was told to tell us, I would say, I don't like it. And I did that 3 different times, and I was right. And from then on, he'd give us the information, and he'd wait till the guys broke away from the formation, and he'd walk over to me, and he'd say, what do you think, Manley? was the best thing that could happen to me.
But first came the training. At Fort Benning, Georgia, Manley completed airborne school. While an exciting experience, it was also terrifying. Here Manley recounts the feeling of being strapped into a harness 100 feet in the air.
The only thing that scared me was they put you in a harness, no parachute, put you in a parachute harness, and they would lift you up facing the ground. They'd take you up 100 feet, and you had to pull the ripcord for an emergency. So you had to pull that, and you only dropped 10 feet. But in the back of your mind, if that damn thing don't work, you're going to go down 100 feet onto concrete, you know.
At first, Manley essentially served as a demolition worker. He worked under the supervision of a sergeant and an officer to dismantle booby traps and even remove trees.
Anything in their way. Booby traps, we used to set some booby traps here and there. But there was always a sergeant and an officer when you were doing that kind of stuff. I wasn't an expert. I would never consider myself an expert. But it was, at the time, I thought it was pretty damn important. Well, I guess it was. So, but I wasn't in a regular marching, except on parades and stuff like that. There were two parachute men and 2 radio ops, and they would be attached to a company, but you weren't part of a squad or anything. So I used to be able to sneak off to the pub and have a couple of beers.
But the fighting would come soon enough. Manley and his fellow paratroopers were deployed to England, where they continued to train. and they didn't know exactly when D-Day was coming. In fact, Manley didn't know until he boarded the plane the night before. And the evening before his jump, Manley stood with troops as General Eisenhower shared intelligence about the Nazis and offered words of encouragement for the paratroopers as they prepared to leave.
The day before I jumped, it was a formation, and they advised us that D-Day was coming. That's all we got out of it. And, and Ike started, Eisenhower, General Eisenhower, he was commander of the whole shooting match. He started to get off when we were told by Ike in his field at 5 in the evening. He was on a two-step stoop, had been brought out into a field so that he would be above the troops. We were all standing there to listen to Ike. And he finished his spiel and he started to go off the two steps, and he says, he spins around like he was shocked. He spun around, he got back up on top again of the two steps, and he said, "Forgive me, gentlemen," he says, I forgot to give you the most important thing. It's the latest intelligence we have. The SS are going into the private homes, taking their uniforms off and wearing civilian clothes. They have an idea of where you're going to be jumping. Up until then, the Germans didn't know where we were going to be jumping. They thought it was up where the channel, the English channel, was most narrow. We went to the most wide to fly over. And the first flight, the aircraft had first, second, third flight. All of them had little red lights on the back of their wings, and you could see from another aircraft, so you wouldn't bump into the one in front of you. And this is at 1 o'clock in the morning, and we could see the lights of the first, second, and we were the third, and we're flying about 800 feet in formation. Well, we saw the first flight turn, and it got through the ack-ack because the Germans had the ack-ack set for bombers. And these guys were coming in at 800 feet, which would be under the ack-ack. The first group, just the last couple of planes, the Germans brought the ack-ack down, and they caught a couple of last of the aircraft in the first flight. The second flight flew right into the ack-ack. Our pilot saw what was happening, and we're looking through. He had the door open so we could see, and there were only 11 of us, and we could see what the hell was going down. We could see the road going up to 400 feet, and then the road went across the top. Well, the other aircraft went up to that point, and they turned left. We were the first aircraft, so we went over it. Probably a mile and a half. The ones behind us, they went like the other guys did. But they were lucky because when the pilots saw what was happening to the second flight, when it got shot up, they lost a lot of aircraft. And what they did, that was at 800 feet. And what they had done, they had gone up to 400 and made that turn. Well, we hadn't made the turn yet. We were still over the channel. Our pilot saw it. He dropped down to 200 feet. We got to France, then he went up the other 200 feet, and we jumped at 400. Half past midnight was second flight, and we were the third flight. First aircraft and the third flight, because we were breaking away the demolition group of 11. Normally there's 18 in a stick. We only had 11. And we were dropped out right over a road, but it was in the wrong area.
Manley and the soldiers in his battalion had no idea where they landed. His sergeant decided to lead the troops towards the nearby houses instead of moving to the fighting on the beach. Remembering General Eisenhower's warning at Greenham Common Airfield, Manley actually refused to follow the sergeant to the red chimney tops of the nearby houses. He stood alone until a group of glider pilots crossed his path.
But when the sergeant did that, the guys were starting, just like a river, they were starting to go with him, you know. And I said, I'm not going, because I was thinking about what Ike said. And he's going, this guy is going to the houses, which is exactly what could be bad. So I said, I'm not going. And all the guys just faded away from me. I stood there, I was almost a half hour. A guy comes up out of the, you know, how little saplings grow along a road that's high, and there's like a ditch on the other side. This guy comes up, he's got his hands like this. I almost shot the poor bastard. And he says, American, American, he says. And that's all he said. He was an American sergeant, he says. And so as long as I could see the fingers, I wasn't too worried, you know. And I'm looking for other people. And he started toward me. And to start with, he's only 100 feet away. And he starts to walk toward me. And he got halfway. All of a sudden, a group comes out. And they're not carrying arms like an infantryman would. They got carbines slung, and they're like they're going on a parade ground. They were glider pilots. They were in this wrong place too. So he and I had talked. Oh, when he's first talking to me, he says, which way is the English Channel? And I said, if you turn your head, you're going to see it, because they were fighting down there. I could see them fighting on the beach. And this is still darkness, you know. And it was a clear night. It was no problem that way. But anyway, the landing area that we went into was 400 feet high, but it went down to the beach. So we were 400 feet above the beach, so you could see everything that was going on. The original people that landed, the people that brought the rest of the group in, they were on the shore fighting the Germans at that time.
Tasked with destroying 4 field pieces overlooking Utah Beach, Manley was no longer able to fulfill his mission without his regiment. Instead, he joined forces with the glider pilots and served as a point man.
This sergeant says to me, where's your group? And I said, they went over to where those chimneys are. I said, I refuse to go because Ike said not to. He says, it's within my realm. He said, I'm taking you aboard as a point man. So now I'm with Americans anyway, you know. The other way I was by myself. I'm sweating out Germans coming down the road, you know. So I gladly took the damn job, because all I had to do was get his group down to the water. They had a boat waiting for them to go back to England and get more gliders and bring supplies. So that's why they were marching the way they were marching. But only glider pilots would.
Still ahead, Ed Manley shares his role at Operation Market Garden and the Battle of the Bulge. Stay with us. This is Veterans Chronicles. I'm Greg Corumbus. Thanks for being with us as we share the story of U.S. Army and World War II veteran Ed Manley. Once the glider crew was where it needed to be, Manley soon rejoined his fellow paratroopers in the 502nd Regiment. Not long after that, Manley ended up in his first fatal exchange of gunfire and soon found himself in the Battle of Carentan.
When I got with these guys, I was the point man. I took them down. I got them down to I almost ran into 2 patrols. One was obviously not a combat patrol, and the second one, and I hit, fortunately, they had crossed the road that I was coming down. So I changed roads, and a little 20 minutes, so a half hour later, I ran into another, which was a combat patrol, and that was where I killed my first guy that I know that I shot. He was one of these out guys, you know, you have scouts out to let you know if there's any problems around or what's going on. And this guy made the mistake. He knew there was something, but he didn't know what the hell it was, the German. And he turned around, and he wasn't 75 feet from me. Pulled the trigger. I know I killed that man, but I mean, he just folded. But basically, people will ask you, how many men did you kill? Well, you don't know. You couldn't possibly know what the hell you're doing when you're in a firefight, you know. But when I got with these guys where I was the point man, I got them down to where the, I'll call it Shore Road, the road that was alongside the English Channel, just like here. And we got down to there. I ran into H Company 502. And I said to the sergeant, I said, Sarge, I'm back with the 502. I said, your boat would be right over in that area there. He thanked me, and I never even knew his name. He thanked me, and he went his way, and I stayed with H Company. I hooked up with another guy that didn't have a sergeant, and we did the shelter halves. He had a half, I had the half. We had to dig down 2 feet for artillery stuff, and we put the shelter half over there, made a tent out of it, you know. And the next morning, we went right back up the road. I had just come down up to the 400, to the road where the other guys, the airplanes turned. We got to that point, we turned and followed the same road. But when you went about, I guess it was 2 miles, 3 miles, we got to another road which went down to the water again. And that's where we took the town. You're saying the 505. 505 was a altogether different operation. And we took the town, and we kept right through. We went right through the town, and we're on the other side. Now, this is H Company 502, and that's where we camped. And then the next day, we took the town. And when we were up at the top of that road that everybody was turning to, when you got to the 2 or 3 miles, and then you went down the same identical type road down the hill. And when you got to the bottom of the hill, that's where the town was. Then we went on right on through, but we had picked up another company up at the top, our backup. They took the town over that we took. We used to razz them about it. We'd be in the pubs, you know. We used to razz them about our backup.
After the Battle of Normandy, Manley took a boat back to England where he awaited his next orders. Those orders came in September with the launch of Operation Market Garden in Holland, as the Allies sought to reach the Rhine River by securing a series of bridges. This time, the jump came during daylight hours. Upon landing, though, Manley discovered that the nearby town was controlled by the Germans. However, that did not deter him from pursuing his mission.
Well, that was a day jump. It was noon, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And it was 800 feet. It wasn't a 400-foot drop. And the guys were all in the pubs because the place was taken. Eindhoven, that was the name of the town. I always was looking for safety, a place to go. If something did happen, I could go to which direction I would go. The rest of the people, they just run, right? I always had to have an object to go to. And I was on this, looking around outside this town. There was a bend in the road like that, and they had cut through a small hill to level it with the rest of the grounds around. And I was on top of that thing. There was a grass knoll. They had taken bulldozers and gone through and leveled the road. So I was on top of this grass thing, and all of a sudden I heard engines going very slow. At first I thought it might be a tank, and I said, no, it can't be a tank. And all of a sudden the truck came around, one truck came around the damn turn, and they're doing like 5 miles, 8 miles an hour. They were looking for something. And they came around the bend, and I'm up on top of this knoll, and it's only about 12, 15 feet higher than the road. And they came around the bend, and there's five guys in the cab. I took the driver, then I took the guy on the door to block exits, and the 3 guys in the middle that were dead meat. I killed the 5 guys. Then I come down, I've got a German truck, and what the hell am I going to do with it, you know? So I go back to the pub where the guys are, and I'm talking to some of the guys and tell them what happened. And I said, we got to get that truck. So, okay, let's go get the truck. In the meantime, a civilian, a Dutchman, he's listening to the conversation at the pub, and he says, do you want to sell it? And I said, I looked at him in shock. I don't know who the hell this guy is. And he spoke better English than I do. And I said, you realize you're talking about American property? I said, that belongs to the military. And he says, well, I'm opening a trucking firm after the war. He says, I have 4 garages. He says, I'll put parts in each of the garages. That's what he was doing. I says, what are you going to pay me in? American? And he says, I have a Renault there. I swapped him the truck. I didn't even have to touch it. He's going to take it and it's gone, you know. And I've got his little car. And I had the car until we left Holland. The damn guy with an orange band on his arm, I had to assume police. And he was checking stuff. I used to play horn and trumpet. And you carry your mouthpiece no matter where you go. You don't have the horn with you, but you carry your mouthpiece in case you run into a horn. Well, I met this family. They had me come in, a couple of us and myself. We went in and had coffee and there was a horn there. And I pulled my mouthpiece out of my pocket and I says, you want me to play a note? Yeah, because nobody in the family could play any longer. And the valves didn't go up and down. They went like this, you know, they swirled. So it would have been priceless here. And so I said to the guy, I said, well, who's playing it now? He says, you are. And he gave me the horn for saving them from the Germans. So that went, so I went to go out of the country. They took the damn truck, the car, and the horn from me. They didn't ask, was it given to me or anything. They just, they assumed I picked it up or something.
Nicknamed Hell's Highway, Highway 69 ran across Holland. It was deemed crucial to the operation for the Allies to maintain control of the roadway. But the German resistance was intense and deadly. And ultimately, Operation Market Garden failed to get the Allies across the Rhine. However, as intense as that fight was, Manley believes the action was more intense at Normandy, and later at the Battle of the Bulge. And that's where we'll pick up Ed Manley's story in just a moment. Our guest this week is World War II and U.S. Army veteran Ed Manley. He was a veteran of the 502nd Parachute Infantry Regiment. A moment ago, we recounted his participation in Operation Market Garden near Eindhoven in Holland. Just 3 months later, Manley found himself at the Battle of the Bulge. As winter fell on the Western Front in late 1944, the U.S. and our allies prepared to dig in for the winter. Germany had other plans, launching a massive counteroffensive in a desperate attempt to turn the momentum of the war. The Germans failed to break through, but the U.S. losses were huge. For his part, at the Bulge, Ed Manley and his crew ran into a tank parked along the side of the road. He couldn't see the tanks, but he knew they were waiting for him.
Bastogne was we ran into a tank park, and there was, where the tanks were, the road went like this, and then the field fell away, and that's where the tanks were. They were in here, and we were back here. We couldn't see the tanks themselves, but we knew they were there. So the sergeant went out in front, the crew of the mortar, 60 millimeter mortar. They had been Americans. They had been killed, apparently by artillery, because there was no shrapnel. It had to be explosion that knocked the 3 guys over that were on the mortar. So boss man private, I got Frank Tiedemann was here, and Eddie Sapinski was here, and they were feeding the mortar. The sergeant was where he could see down into where the tanks were, and he was going hand signals. So they dropped one in, stopped, and I still laugh about it now, but it was serious as hell at the time. What was happening was the tank was sitting behind us, no more than 150 feet away, with the engine just purring. Apparently, they figured out where the hell these mortar shells were coming from. And they finally cut. What they did, the first time they missed, they went up the ditch. There was how the road has stone on the side where the water pushes the sand away. That couldn't have been more than 3 to 5 feet away from me, where I was sitting on my left leg. I was raised up, and that's how it got up underneath. I was sitting on my leg, actually on my left leg, and this leg was out like this, for balance, I guess. That's how that damn thing it's the only way it could have happened, because they missed me going up. They must have come back down again. And I said to Frank Tiedemann, I said, because he turned white, I thought he had been hit. He turned ashen, and he's looking over my shoulder. And he sees the tank, but I don't know it's there. And he cut it loose, and I said, are you hurt, Frank? When the thing went up, I said, are you hurt, Frank? And where are you hurt? That's what I asked him, where are you hurt? And he says, he points, he didn't say a word. And so I turned to see what the hell was wrong, and I see the tank. Well, just after I did that, he must have come back down again, and that's when I got it. It went in 2 inches from my hip bone, went through, missed my privates, went through, came out here, 4 holes, and I had winter underwear on. And apparently that's what stopped the blood from showing, because if the Germans had seen the blood, 3 rounds, they had it down to a science. And they got on either side of me, where Frank was on this elbow and Sapinski on this one. They lifted me up, otherwise I would have been sitting there. I'd still be sitting there.
If it wasn't for his buddies, Manley would have died in Bastogne. Thankfully, he survived, and now, just months shy of his 100th birthday, Manley still possesses his rebellious and fiery spirit. His service in World War II earned him a Purple Heart, 2 Bronze Stars, and 2 presidential citations. Later becoming a father to 3, Manley worked as a New York State police officer. But as he said at the beginning of our conversation, the day that forever defined him was June 6, 1944. And it's true of so many who served alongside him that day and during the war. I'm Greg Corombos, and this is Veterans Chronicles. Hi, this is Greg Corombos, and thanks for listening to Veterans Chronicles, a presentation of the American Veterans Center. For more information, please visit AmericanVeteransCenter.org. You can also follow the American Veterans Center on Facebook, and on Twitter, we're at AVC Update. Subscribe to the American Veterans Center YouTube channel for full oral histories and special features, and of course, please subscribe to the Veterans Chronicles podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks again for listening, and please join us next time for Veterans Chronicles.